Thank you, Council and Mayor. I just want to, my name is Torgen Johnson, Solana Beach. I'd like to just touch on the topic of transparency. And I think the Fukushima disaster was the transparency that the public needed to understand what wasn't being discussed by the industry. There was a NRC phone call, it was a phone-in conference, a nationwide conference with the NRC 2 weeks ago, and it was to discuss the economic impacts of a potential nuclear disaster at any one of the 104 nuclear power plants in the country. And there were 20 people in the entire nation that phoned in. And there were only about 6 people that actually spoke. And I thought it was possibly the most important phone call that afternoon. I get choked up just thinking about how few people know about this. Anyways, they were trying to develop more accurate computer models to determine what the economic impacts would be to surrounding communities, and that's why we're here today. The reason why this was brought to the city councils was to get transparency. I was shocked at what I heard, and what it was is the NRC hadn't even considered all the public infrastructure and public lands that would be impacted. They had a model that came up with a kind of a replacement value for structures. And I was thinking about this conversation tonight and the Planning Commission and all the hard work that you do to create Del Mar. I don't think there's a replacement value for Del Mar. And I think as other disciplines, other experts come in to this discussion, which is what I'm encouraging, and a lot of the people here in the room and across the country are encouraging, is a broader discussion, adjudicatory hearings, and really transparency in particular with this San Onofre issue. My feeling is that if Edison has nothing to hide, they should be fully supportive of these hearings, absolute transparent hearings. I just want to say one thing very quickly. Well, there's my 2 minutes. Thank you.
Mayor, council members, thank you very much for having me. I've just evacuated from Japan. I live 380 miles away from the Fukushima reactors. I lived there for 25 years. I'm a native Californian, and I presently live on 5th Avenue in Solana Beach. And I can tell you, personally, we lived through the meltdowns. If you think about 400 miles from the reactors, that's about San Francisco to San Diego. And we lived for a year with a Geiger counter measuring radiation contamination in our food and in our atmosphere. And it was just a really a big wake-up call to the human cost and the economic cost. Who bears those costs? It's the people that are affected. And this has turned into a have and a have-not issue. It's a very, I can't stress enough how living 380 miles away from the reactors, a city councilman in my area did a post-Fukushima meltdown soils tests, and that was proven to be 5 times the cesium content as pre-Fukushima levels. This is quite far away. If you put all of the Japanese islands together, it's about the size of California. So when we come to think of the actual costs of families, my husband is still in Japan. He has a company. Many people depend on him. He's coming back and forth. This tragedy has taken torn apart communities, torn apart families. I have my 2 daughters here. We're very fortunate to be able to come to California, to come home. 1 in 3 children are left in Fukushima with irregularities and tumors of the thyroid gland due to this terrible accident. You have yes. So anyway, please take that into account. Thank you so much.
Okay. I want to clarify some of the things that the Edison spokesperson said. He talked about this chart, and he said a lot of these were self-reported by Edison. That's not true. These are 100% safety allegations reported by employees. This is a last resort mechanism for employees. When their management won't take a safety issue seriously, their only option is to report them to the NRC. One of the whistleblowers, an electrical engineer at San Onofre, had tried for up to 10 years to get a problem with circuit breakers not working fixed. he was one in that count of retaliated employees. I do not know to this day if the problem has been fixed. This is what got me involved in this issue, is they do not take safety seriously. And I really feel sorry for those employees. A lot of employees are so afraid to speak up, and we hear about it in San Clemente. They live near us, so we hear these stories. So that's one issue. And on a different issue regarding Huntington Beach 3 and 4, the independent system operator has a plan for next year. Huntington Beach 3 and 4 will be running just to bring in electricity, but it won't be run for energy, so it won't be contributing carbon to the environment. So we have a solution for next summer there. Okay. And then also, Edison has filed formal opposition to those investigations. So I again could give you more details on that. So they do not want to have those investigations based on their legal action they've taken.
Thank you very much. My name is Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight. I want to compliment you guys on your very good questions and the analysis that you've been doing. It's great to see that happen in small cities like this. Safety is much of your job. We don't want a plant that's unsafe. We don't want a meltdown. That would be a disaster. We heard about carbon-free. If you look at the whole cycle of the nuclear cycle, it's not carbon-free. You got to go through all of the mining and everything else. It's very carbon-intensive. So whenever you hear that, you're hearing something that's not really correct. The other thing that you hear is about the computer modeling. Well, they wouldn't need a lot of computer modeling had they used the same design. And the fact is they screwed up with the computer modeling. If you look carefully, you find out they wanted to surreptitiously boost the output of these things by 31,000 homes worth of power and not go through the right type of analysis, the right kind of hearings. So they didn't do mock-up testing either. I'm an engineer, so I get into all this. I asked a lot of questions from the last meeting and their report, 25 pages of questions and a lot of analysis from our standpoint. We don't have time to answer your questions. That's a problem. What they always say is the cause is the tube-to-tube wear is caused by excessive steam velocity. Well, that's not the cause. That's like saying the cause of the death of Robert F. Kennedy was a bullet. You need to know who pulled the trigger. Also, you got to go back and say, why was the steam going fast? What did you change to cause the steam going any faster? The fact is that they wanted to get more steam out of these. They wanted to get them to last a long time. I don't hold that against them. But they actually thinned all the tubes by 10.4%. They took 11 tons of steel out of every steam generator and made them that much thinner. You look at that big containment building, that's not really the containment, it's the width of a dime. That's the width of the tubes. Sorry, out of time. Thank you.
Good evening. Gary Headrick, and I'm founder of San Clemente Green with my wife. And I mention that because we got involved indirectly. The problem came to us when whistleblowers talked about the new steam generators that were being implemented and that proper testing was being avoided. And so being thrown into the problem, I became an intermediary to the NRC and got no results. No one would listen about hot functional testing and things that they were skipping and avoiding. And so as just an average citizen, I'm aware of things that are not scientific, but just bring common sense to mind about our real situation here. It's, we have the NRC that will not listen to their employees. They won't listen to people in the public that have specific information. They make decisions that are in favor of promoting nuclear energy generation. And the public is put in this very tenuous position to put our faith in the NRC and even the CPUC, whose president used to work with Edison. There's this whole cohort of people that are involved in this process that totally erode any confidence the public has in this process. And you look at the fact that we're going to gamble on a computer model again, when the only way to know if there's a problem restarting those steam generator number 2 is if there's a leak. And this time it might be a big leak instead of a small leak. And then it's out of our control. The genie's out of the bag. So that's our concern. And Another thought came to mind in all this process. We talked about cost here and the effect there. Well, what about if there really is a problem? In Japan, the commissioner of the NRC, Magwood, was just recently quoted as saying, there is no technology to take care of the problem that's in Japan. They have to invent the technology to fix the solution. We don't want to go there. We need this independent investigation, and then we need even more.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the council. I'm from Carlsbad. I've been watching that plant for about 20 years since I moved to California, and been watching nuclear power for about 40 years. Right now, let's just talk about the steam generators and not talk about the spent fuel, 250 pounds a day that each reactor produces. The steam generators in Unit 2 obviously are exactly identical. In trying to review this particular problem, one of the documents that I found said that reducing the power is not necessarily going to stop fluid-induced fluid elastic instability. It's sort of like if you're driving a car and the wheel is vibrating at a speed, sometimes slowing down isn't going to make it vibrate less. It'll even vibrate more. So they're not going to be able to just restart it. And when they talk about restarting it at 70%, that's 70% output at the turbines. But what exactly the actual steam difference is going to be may not be anything like that. It's 2,200 pounds of pressure on the inside of the tubes and about 1,200 pounds of pressure on the outside of the tubes. And the real problem is if there's a main steam line break and that 1,200 pounds of pressure drops down to 50 pounds or whatever, just drops. Now you've got the 2,200 pounds of pressure on the one side and who knows what, a couple hundred pounds of pressure on the other side. And that's when those 8 tubes that failed during testing, that's where the real problem is they failed at pressures that were below that kind of a situation. So we don't want anything like that happening. We don't want to be an experiment for Southern California Edison. We don't really care why it doesn't work. We can see that it's exactly the same, and if they start it, we're going to be taking the same risk that we took with Unit 3, which was a possibility of a cascading failure. But even one tube would release in the half hour that it would take them to shut it down, about what it took last time, about 150,000 gallons of radioactive water into that secondary loop and then out into the atmosphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council, for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Sharon Hoffman. I live in Carlsbad, and I agree with so much of what was said tonight. I wanted to just point out a couple of things. One is that Southern California Edison freely admits that they do not understand why this happened. And therefore, they don't understand how to keep it from happening again in the future. I think that's a very foolish way to deal with very dangerous technology. And I'm simply shocked that the engineers can look at it that way and say, that's a safe thing to do. Let's just try. Maybe this will work. Maybe that'll work. That just doesn't seem very smart to me. In terms of the retaliation at San Onofre is the worst in the nation. But this is an endemic problem in the industry. In fact, it exists in the NRC itself. Congressman Ed Markey of Massachusetts has requested an investigation of the retaliatory nature and chilling effects within the NRC. Now, how can an agency that can't have a free discussion within its own agency regulate an industry and make sure that they are getting all the information? Again, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And finally, I want to just mention that the idea of nuclear power as baseload power is kind of erroneous, because when we had the blackout last year, what's the first thing they do? They shut down San Onofre. San Onofre cannot handle fluctuations in the grid. So as soon as there's a real crisis, they shut it down. That's not baseline power. Thank you very much.
Mayor and Councilman, thank you for having us here to speak. I wanted to say that I was particularly impressed with how you guys were taking very seriously the city planning, and it struck me as very serious and very heartfelt. And I want to share with you when I first became involved with the nuclear power plant. I moved to San Clemente in around 2000, but I think it was around 2009. I woke up one evening, it was rainy, and the
nuclear alarm was going off very close to my neighborhood. It wouldn't stop. It was obviously not a test because it was going on at 3 o'clock in the morning. That alarm continued to go off, and we called the police department, we called the fire department. All of those lines were jammed. We could not get through, okay? Repeatedly. It is no joke when this happens to you in your house and your family. I had to pack up all my computers and all my important documents basically and shove them into the trunk of my car. And then after I was complete with all of that, I had to wake up my 6-year-old daughter and put her into her child seat in the car and stuff her blanket and 1 or 2 stuffed animals in there. Now, when you heard what she said about what was going on in Fukushima, that was 400 miles away. I live less than 10 miles away. You're less than 50. Is that something that you want for your citizens? Is that what you planned for every day when you was taking so seriously your city council planning commissions? This is a serious threat, and he is diminishing the threat significantly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Martha Sullivan. I worked for the State Public Utilities Commission for 20 years. The last third of it, I was the manager of their environmental assessment section. I managed the environmental review and mitigation monitoring for the major utility infrastructure project. That was in the Energy Division, which is the key staff organization that regulates Edison, SDG, PG&E, SoCalGas, and so forth. So I've had a lot of experience with the PUC process, and I want to just say, one, the PUC is going to be required by law to open an OII after 9 months of the plant being out of service. So Edison's not going to have any choice about it, although they opposed it when the commission proposed an OII this last summer. Secondly, the commission has a very prescribed adjudicatory process that it goes through. It has administrative law judges, it has rules of evidence, it can subpoena witnesses, people are sworn. It's a whole sort of court process. But one of the points I want to make is a big part of that process is essentially peer review. Independent experts are able to come and be sworn and give testimony and be cross-examined and file, detailed technical testimony. And that's really what we're asking for here, is that, and they're going to have to go through some level of that with the commission, because the commission doesn't have jurisdiction over the safety, but the commission is going to have jurisdiction over whether it should authorize Edison's and SDG&E's ratepayers to have to pay, again, to repair and restore these units. I want to remind everybody that we went through this once before with Unit 1. Similar problems with Unit 1. The commission wound up finding it would not be cost effective to repair Unit 1, and they were not going to have the ratepayers foot that bill.
I'm sorry.
And Edison and SDG&E decided to decommission the plant. So we're at the same point now.
My name is Dr. Arrigo. I'm a former resident of Del Mar when I was a graduate student in mathematics doing mathematical modeling at the University of San Diego, at University of California at San Diego. The problem with mathematical modeling is it greatly depends on your being able to have sensors and the equipment put in place in order to be able to develop the model correctly. That obviously was not the case, that the sensors and appropriate technology in order to make a good model were in place because they were never able to make one. So you cannot assume, you should assume that the NRC and its experts will not be able to make a better model or will not be able to make an accurate and reliable one. Number two, I'm retaliated against by the U.S. government for my whistleblowing about the way the waste has been used from radiation from nuclear power plants. A lot of it is being turned into depleted uranium, and the studies I did for the Pentagon showed that the radiation, the depleted uranium being used halfway around the world in Afghanistan and Iraq comes back into the United States about a week later. It's in nanoparticle form. It's breathed in, and it increases the death rate in children with asthma in the United States and Canada in the week after it's used. and anyone who's critically ill, auto accidents, skiing accidents, and so on, has an increased risk of dying from our use of depleted uranium, and some of that depleted uranium is coming from our nuclear power plants, and the NRC is hiding from you the fact that we're having a lot of blowback in terms of our health risks because the nuclear waste is not being put underground properly and kept there forever. Now we're talking about 4.5 billion years that this is a health effect for everyone on the planet, for all life on the planet, and this problem of waste disposal is not being taken care of properly.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other public speaker slips, so I will close the public portion of the hearing. I want to thank all the members of the Public Division